You're listening to Games from the Cellar, where we play board games and then we talk about them. I'm Steven, your host, and tonight I was joined by John to play a two-player game of Alien Frontiers. Alien Frontiers was designed by Troy Niemann and was published by Clever Mojo Games. It was nominated for many Golden Geek Awards in 2011, including Most Innovative Board Game, Best Thematic Board Game, Best Strategic Board Game, Best Family Game, and Best Artwork/Presentation. At the time of this recording, Alien Frontiers has a 7.4 rating with 15,000 ratings on Board Game Geek and is currently ranked 283. It's a 2 to 4 player medium weight game that plays in about 90 minutes. Thank you for joining us in the cellar as we go in depth with Alien Frontiers. By the way, we're talking about Alien Frontiers. As we know, I've had an issue with my gameplay logging, so I would say I've probably played this about 4 or 5 times. I have one game logged, and I actually recall playing this with 6 people because the expansions say you can do that, and I will say, do not do that ever. I think 4 players, this game is perfect.
Okay.
I mean, obviously, we're about to play it with 2. But we're essentially, with 2 players, we're blocking off certain spaces so that some of the
board is shut off.
So some of those spaces are marked off so that the board's a little tighter for 2 players.
Right, because this is a worker placement game, and that's the nature of worker
essentially
placement.
Is a worker placement.
Yep.
This is no, because Kingsburg came before this. I was going to say this is the first Dice's worker placement game, but I think Kingsburg falls into that category, and I know Kingsburg came first.
Okay. I'll be curious to see, and I'm sure somebody out there is smart enough to know. I believe this was like the first Kickstarter game that people were like, gee, maybe I don't need to contact Days of Wonder or Fantasy Flight or one of those other game companies. I might just be able to do this on my own.
Or it was, hey, I contacted all you guys, and you
got
said
your
no,
shot.
so ha ha ha.
Here we go.
Yeah. So we've looked back, and it looks like you've played 3 or 4 times.
Yep, long time ago.
And I've played 3 or 4 times a long time ago as well, because I know when we first got it, so like back in 2012 or 2010, whatever it ended up being,
right?
I recall playing it a couple of times, like right off the bat, because back then we didn't have 300 games each,
right, and 300 new games coming out each week.
Yeah,
that you need to try and keep up with. Right.
So we had a smaller collection, so things got replayed more back in the day.
Yep.
But I do recall playing this one quite a few times, and I kind of recall the conversation about this versus Kingsburg, and honestly, I think there's a place for both of these, even though they share the same core mechanic of rolling dice and then placing them on the board to be able to take some kind of an action. I really feel like once that action is done, the games are completely different from each other. And
yeah, and there's I shouldn't say that. Kingsburg has what you're kind of building up as well, and I'm going to be curious because we've played Kingsburg a fair amount through the years, so that one keeps coming back. Mm-hmm. This one is not, and I'm trying to decide if it's because it just got set in a corner and we forgot about it, or if it just doesn't call out as much as Kingsburg has called out.
I will tell you exactly why it hasn't come out, and it's because of that game where we tried to play it with 6 people.
Everybody got a bad taste in their mouth.
It was a full-on terrible experience. Now, granted, part of that was some of the people we were playing with are not people that I typically enjoy playing games with, but were around at the time. But then on top of that, there's just so much that you have to do in a 6-player game with the expansions, and once the play goes around 5 people and it comes back to you, the board state has changed in such a way that it really kind of...
So you lose control.
You really are only paying attention when it's your turn. You can't really plan. There's no long-term strategy that happens, where in a 4-player game, there's still enough on the board that you can still kind of, all right, I can't do the first thing that I wanted to do, but I can do the second thing that I want to do. So there are, in the 4-player game, there's still enough room on the board to kind of get what you want done. But in that 6-player, like, you got the moon that you got to keep track of and roll another set of dice, and then each player's got their own powers that you got to keep up with, and they have a station that you can put your dice on because you've got more people, so you need more places to put dice, so you got to keep up with who's got what and where you can go.
It just outgrows its value. Similar to Terraforming Mars, which now is a monstrosity as well. And this is obviously a game on a much smaller scale, but that same concept of if you stretch it too much, it's going to tear. Mm-hmm. You're better off keeping it to the right size so that you've got a nice controllable game that can tailor its experience for you. Yeah. So,
and in all honesty, I think this game could sing with 4 players and all the expansions, especially after you've played it, 5 or 6 times with just the base, and then start adding them one-on-one, right. one by one.
So you've got the footing. You understand how to play.
But I really think the problem was adding those 2 extra players. I think that was the only problem. If the box said, hey, these are expansions, you can still only play with 4 people, I think it would have been fine.
Okay.
But yeah, it was that one experience. I don't remember a lot of things, but I do remember hating myself for suggesting Alien Frontiers was 6 with the expansions.
All right, well, let's see if we can shake off that bad feel by playing it now.
We're going to go ahead and give this a play, and we will report back when we are done.
Hello.
Alien Frontiers. Do you have what it takes to colonize a new world?
So we were terraforming Mars, is what you're saying?
Like colonizing frontiers.
A new world.
I mean, it is Mars.
It certainly looks like Mars, and one of these spaces is actually called terraforming. So I think maybe a Stronghold owes these people a couple of dollars for the theme idea.
I mean, are these not Asimov craters? Is that not a place on Mars?
That I don't know.
The Herbert Valley? No.
He just named it after all the famous science fiction authors of the 50s. Yeah, so it's exactly, the Golden Age art matches the Golden Age authors. All of the authors are from that Golden Age of science fiction, Astounding Magazine, that whole crowd.
So we have completed our game of Alien Frontiers. John won 13-11.
Believe it or not.
It's 2. We played 2 players. I think it played pretty well, 2 players, but I definitely want to play this again at 4.
It's going to be a lot tighter at 4.
It'll be a lot tighter. Well, I mean, we did have a lot of the spaces kind of taken up by dummy dice.
Yep.
I don't think it opens up that much more, but it definitely, it's a knife fight in a closet, as you like to say sometimes, when it comes to worker placements.
Yeah, and this one, so I'll just disclaimer, I'm not the biggest fan of worker placement. In fact, typically I kind of grit my teeth about it, but Kingsburg and this both have that dice rolling mechanic where somebody needs to get at least a little bit lucky in order to claim the spot that you want. So there's you don't have that sort of hate placement that's just permanently there.
It's there, but it's also mitigated because again you're really limited to the spaces that you roll for. Right.
And I had cards, and you had one card, I think, but I had cards that allowed me to reduce a die, to flip a die, to re-roll my entire set. So in theory, I had a shot, and I think I re-rolled a couple of times to kind of, see if I could find a place to get to the Marauders or whatever it is that allows you to steal stuff from other people. Mm-hmm. So that allows you to get into places that maybe you wouldn't be able to get into otherwise. And you had the cannon one that allows you to essentially push my dice out of the way.
Yeah.
So it's costing you resources, but there's ways to mitigate the way worker placement sometimes can just infuriate me. Mm-hmm. And so from that perspective, this is a much better game for that kind of thing. And I'll be honest with you, I like games that have a little bit more lucky to them.
It's compared to Kingsburg. Obviously, it's very Kingsburg-like in that it's a dice rolling worker placement. And as you said, it's not just take whatever's. It's, you know what it is. So most worker placements, based on your board state, there's always an optimal move.
Yes, exactly.
Gackmits.
I absolutely have to do this. This is what I got to do right now. And then somebody takes it, and you're screwed. And especially if you've played a while, the other person can look over at your board and say, "Oh man, he needs another piece." So I absolutely guarantee I'm going to take it, even though I don't need another piece. I'm going to take this just to block him.
Yeah. So I said Gackmits. You want to tell people what Gackmits is?
Yeah, it's my horrible acronym for generally accepted correct move in this situation.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea is that you can actually like get up from the table, go order a pizza, and the rest of the guys at the table can look and say, well, if John was here, this is the move that would make the most perfect sense.
Mm-hmm.
And in some games, you can actually come to consensus with all 5 people sitting at the table, and they can take your turn for you. And at that point, at times, I will let my brain wander, especially if I've had a hard day at work, and allow everybody to come to that consensus for me so that I don't have to work so hard in order to get it. And that's not my kind of gaming. I like a game where, you're saying, don't tell me the odds, and you take a shot at something and you see what you can make work. And this game has a bit of that.
And see, to me, that is the purest encapsulation of worker placement games. Is there's always going to be a generally accepted correct move in this situation.
Yeah.
There's always going to be some. You're not going to look at Agricola and be like, it's really a die roll. Like, not really a die roll, but it's 50-50 if I take wood or if I take stone. Like, it could go either way. No, one of those is always going to be better. There might be a very fringe situation where you need both of them, so it doesn't matter which order you take them.
Mm-hmm.
But somebody can, mess that up and take it on your next. So it could be blocked, but there's always going to be a hierarchy of everything that needs to happen.
Right.
With this, there's so many options available, and you're going to roll the dice every time, so it's going to limit what you can do.
Right.
Yeah, you can still Gackmits it to a degree, but it really kind of like loosens it up and shakes it up and like really kind of makes you think on your feet every time.
Yeah, just enough
around.
In this particular case, just enough as far as I'm concerned. 'Cause I like a little bit of rattle in the gameplay. I like it where you make a decision and then you roll a die or you turn over a card and you see how it goes, so that it lets you put your own personality into the play. Either you can take a big risk because you're behind and you're looking to swing for the fences, or you can play safe because you're ahead and or you need to build your machine. And to some extent, Alien Frontiers doesn't allow that because you roll your dice first.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point, your decisions are somewhat made. But with the cards that you pick up from the one section of the board that allow you to flip a die or add a number to it or subtract a number to it or even re-roll your whole set, those all cost you. So you have to decide if you want to pay the resources for that. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, that allows things to get a little bit more wild and zany. Suddenly you've got 3 or 4 places that maybe have a good result for you, and there's where you get to decide which direction you want to go, and you get to play your game instead of the game playing you.
Yeah. So I think it's really cool how each section, it's not just... So in Kingsburg, you're matching numbers, so you really want to get the 17 to get the queen.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's the number you ultimately want to roll because it gives you the most resources. And it's all about combining your dice to make numbers to get resources.
Mm-hmm.
There are a couple of actions, but I mean, it's essentially just resource gathering to then spend later in the round. With this, you're looking for pairs, you're looking for triplets, you're looking for small straights.
Small numbers, big numbers.
Small numbers, big. Like, every combination of die has a place that it's going to shine, essentially.
Yeah.
You're not really... I mean, yeah, rolling a bucket of 6s is going to be great for you, but at the same time, having a good spread of numbers is also great for you. I mean, you could take a roll of like 5 1s and make it work.
Right, yeah.
And in fact, if you've got like a pile of resources already... you can really make that work for you because there's the one spot that really wants you to roll low.
Yep.
The trading post.
Other spots where as long as you've got matches, it really doesn't matter whether they're high or low or not. And
I always in my mind, every time I play Kingsburg, I always want to like log like what the total number somebody rolled was to see if that is an indicator of like who wins. Because like with Kingsburg, it's like I said, you want to roll that
high
17.
Is good. Yep, high is good
because you want to get all those resources.
Yep.
And high is good. High is going to get you more resources or the better resources. in Alien Frontiers, with the way everything is kind of like how everything is good. Ones are good. Pairs of ones are good. Triplets of ones are even good. I don't ever think that would be a consideration. I don't think like the person who rolled the highest throughout the game is going to win. Like in Kingsburg, I think probably could be the case.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
So and you know, I'm going to go in a completely different direction.
Mm-hmm.
And again, with the comparison to Kingsburg, the art in Kingsburg is kind of cartoony and completely doesn't have a flavor all its own.
Mm-hmm.
You look at the cover of Alien Frontiers here, and frankly, the pieces inside the board, it has a flavor to it, one that you can really pick out. It uses this 1950s sort of artwork,
like serial sci-fi artwork.
Yes, exactly. And the gameplay and the artwork and the entire package is unified in how it's delivered. And when you consider that this was not a pad, do you know?
No, I stopped us right.
Okay, so we got everything.
Yeah,
okay, good.
We got everything until I said stop. All right, technical difficulties aside, I think you were talking about
just how doggone pretty the game is. Yeah, and so and you know, I'm a big fan of everything's got to match. And sometimes you can't tell if something matches or not. And if you can't tell, that means it doesn't match. And it could, because when it does match, you can really pick it out. And this is a game, regardless of what you think about the particular play mechanics, the package makes sense. It's comfortable in its own skin. I mean, it brings something to the table. The pieces are simple. It's basic dice. They've got nice colors, and that's fine. Little round dots for the like domed cities that you're putting down on the planet. It looks like what it's trying to be.
Yeah, they look like little, domed colonies that you would put on. I mean, not that we would in modern time, but back in the serialized sci-fi days,
right?
That's what it invokes is those domed.
And that's what it shows on the cover of the box. So from that perspective, I think, and this is Clever Mojo Games, and like I said, I think this was kind of a guy doing his own thing, and art by Mark Maxwell is what's written on the box, and Mark certainly did a great job with the art as far as I'm concerned. It looks the part. So this was fun to get back to.
Yeah, Kickstarter's got a bad name now, and I say it does. I mean, people love Kickstarter. Kickstarter's great. It allows big companies to do grand things. But I remember it was the Wild West back in 2010 when Kickstarter really started becoming a thing for board games. And, back then, like, it wasn't a pre-order system. It was, hey, give me some money and I might be able to put something out.
Right. And I think early on there were 20 or 30 people that had been working on games for 5 or 8 years and just could never figure out how they were going to make this work. And suddenly it fell in their lap. And so you had this backlog of great ideas and that people had spent years working on that suddenly had an opportunity to go after this. So I think those first couple of years, it was a much more interesting concept than it is now. Now it's just sort of a pre-order system where they charge you 2 years in advance. So I'll be honest with you, I buy most of my games used these days. Not only because they're cheaper, but quite frankly, because I like to sniff around a little bit before I go after something. And the only way to do that is to wait. And oftentimes, especially with a game coming out of Kickstarter, the only way to get it after the fact is to get it in the aftermarket, because it's either a dog game and there's a million of them and you don't want them, or it's a good game and it's sold out. And there's nobody who has it in stock. And then at that point, you're looking to trade or to purchase used. And as often as not, even these Kickstarter games that are, quote, in demand, as often as not, I'm getting them for half price, or I'm trading games that I'm done with for that are the equivalent of half price. And it ends up saving a lot of money as well. And you get the things bagged, and you get little Plano boxes inside and all sorts of fancy things. I've gotten sleeved cards. I've gotten Plano boxes. I've gotten... I've even gotten like little Matchbox cars and things like that. So sometimes getting a used game is kind of an extra little bonus.
I remember being very jealous of your copy of Merchants of Venus 2nd edition, because I have all of my chips in Crown Royal bags, as one should, but yours came in.
Yeah,
everything was organized in Plano containers, and for when you're setting yours up, it's like, pull it out, set it next to the board, pull it out, set it next to the board. Where I'm like, dump it out, sort it out.
Yep.
Then, so.
Yeah, that's pretty sweet.
That's pretty good.
So the other game I'll mention that this reminds me of is Mission Red Planet, which also has its own art, which is not at all like this art. It's still obviously it's still a spaceship, but it's a far more kind of Russian communism sort of everything is big and bulky sort of feel. But this has the same kind of thing where you're trying to do area of control on the planet's surface, which is broken into pieces. The difference is that instead of doing it with worker placement, where everything is kind of out in the open and you can see what's going on, is it's all done with role selection. And anybody who maybe thinks Alien Frontiers came close but was a miss, Mission Red Planet could be something you could be looking at as well. So, I mean, this game's keeping some good company. Kingsburg, in spite of my complaining about its art, is a game I always enjoy. Mission Red Planet we don't get out as often. I have the original box where it takes about 20 minutes to get the lid off, so you got to actually be pretty excited about playing or it's not going to happen. But this is one I think we should get out a little more often, too. And with any luck, we've kind of gotten the bad taste out of your mouth from when you played it with 6.
Yeah. So, I mean, I said as soon as we turned the mics off to play, I looked at John. I said, point blank, I love this game. It makes me so sad that I haven't wanted to play this again since the last time. And I'm glad that we were able to play it 2-player. I mean, yeah, I don't think it's as good 2-player, but it is definitely a whole lot better than it was with 6. So if you take anything away from any of our conversation about Alien Frontiers, let it be never play it with more than 4, no matter how many expansions you add to it.
So that's the tagline for this game. Never run out of money and acquire.
Yes.
Never play with 6.
Never play with
Alien
6.
Frontiers.
Never play with 5 or 6.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm actually looking through my Kickstarter history here, and yeah, as I mentioned, Eminent Domain was the first thing that I kickstarted. I guess I did not kickstart Alien Frontiers. I must have
picked it up afterwards.
I picked it up afterwards somewhere. I don't know if it was retail or online or through trade, but you know what? I'm glad I did. This was at a point where I was the primary buyer for the game group, I think. I had the most disposable income, and I was the one bringing new games every week, and some of them were pretty bad.
There were a few.
But then every now and then
you hit on a winner.
I hit on a winner. And, I look back at my collection, and on my shelf, I have quite a few games I have quite a few games that are a lot older than I would say, like, most of the comment on my collection threads that you see on Reddit.
Yeah.
I've got a good mix. I got a copy of Acquire there from 1964. Go back and listen to our Acquire episode. It's actually really good.
Yeah, Primordial Soup is there. That's
Primordial Soup
97.
Yeah, and that was one of the first games I bought back in the late 2000s. When I first got into the hobby. So, I mean, Cellar's Catan obviously is kind of a staple for gaming. Although we never play it, I don't know if we ever will, but it's there just in case. You have to. It's the same with Ticket to Ride.
Yep. It's like your totem. It's the game you have because...
But, I like Ticket to Ride. I know people have problems with it.
And I like Catan. So...
Yeah. And then, I got new things like Azul is a newer title. And I think the most recent thing that I purchased was Ark Nova, but then we got rid of it. But yeah, so, I mean, this isn't an episode about my collection, but all that to say, there are really good games out there that are older, and people really need to check them out.
Yeah.
Like Cult of the New is, I mean, if that's who you are, great, but make time for the older games.
Yeah, and don't play B- games.
Yeah.
If a game is not, if you don't want to play a game, right again after you're done playing it. It probably means you shouldn't be playing it 3 weeks from now either. Yeah. I mean, if a game isn't working, go out and get the games that do. Everybody's got a different taste, but there's plenty of stuff out there that's just great. And some of it may be 20 years old. Don't let that scare you off. Mm-hmm. Some of it may be brand new. And for old people like me, I need to make sure that doesn't scare me off too. Yeah. I mean, you got to try new things. And you got to find the ones that work.
So if you were to compare my collection with John's collection, you'll see vastly different they're vastly different in what I have versus what you have.
Mm-hmm.
So, I have a good mix of thematic. I have a good mix of less Euro than I used to have, but John's more into confrontation. So a lot of his games are going to be like in your face, confrontational, either pulling shits from a cup or throwing dice at each other.
I joke that I like worker placement games where I place my worker on top of your worker and kick him off of the hex.
Yeah.
So it's we definitely have different flavors, but at the same time we find an awful lot of common ground because if you find a good game, it's a good game regardless of what kind of games you particularly care for.
I mean, this is a perfect example of that because I mean the theming's great. It speaks to both of us. I know you're like really into space. You love space games. That's like another theme that you'll see in John's collection is there's a lot of space type games. There is some Euro feel in the kind of worker placement here.
Definitely, yeah.
But at the same time you're rolling dice. So there's a lot of randomness that's just kind of built into the game. Yeah. So I think Alien Frontiers is a good mix between the two, and it was doing the hybrid game model before.
Yeah, that's a good point.
The hybrid game model became like a big thing.
Yep.
So
I was just going to say you had this kind of transition from trying to break everything into Euro and Ameritrash, and then around 2010, 2012, the two kind of started to blend together. They started to make titles that did both at the same time. And I think Alien Frontiers is one of the first ones that said, you know what, the dice rolling is okay after all. Is we can still do worker placement, we can still do things like area control, but there's nothing wrong with you just getting a bad roll and you got to make it work this turn and other turns when you get blessed.
Yeah, and it's great because, like I said, like this one, every die has a place. Yep. And it's not trying to roll high. It's it's kind of like Yahtzee. Like at some point you're going to need a bunch of ones.
Yep, that's exactly right.
And so I mean, obviously Yahtzee you still want to roll high because of the straights and the runs and whatever. But the point is it's a great game. Like the luck is mitigated by the design, and I wouldn't call it a lucky game. It's really strategic and tactical on how you use the dice. So it's not like just a dice rolling luck fest. It's actual decisions, actual good decisions. There's a really good decision space in this game. All right. So having said all of that, taking into account the art, taking into account the way the mechanisms all blend together, thinking back on the times that we've played it, even discounting that 6-player game with all the expansions, if we were to sit down and talk about how we would rate this on our Board Game Geek rating list, it's 1 to 10, 1 being absolute garbage, it's unplayable, and 10 being the greatest game that has ever been graced the human race. Where do you feel that Alien Frontiers falls in that 1 to 10 range?
In spite of the fact that it's worker placement and that's not a particular favorite of mine, this is a very good 7.
Okay, great.
I think so.
Yeah, I think I'm in line with you there. The blending the mechanisms, as I said, is about as perfect a blend as you can find in a game. In general, the playtime is, we probably got this done in like
an hour,
a little over an hour.
Yeah.
2 players, it's going to be shorter. Like 4 players expect to play for about an hour and a half, I guess.
Yeah, probably.
So the playtime, the mix of mechanisms, like I can't think of a better 7 than Alien Frontiers. I can't.
So we agree on this one.
Yeah, I can't say enough how great I think this game is, and how if it's in somebody who knows collection, they need to bring it out. You need to play it.
Pull it out and give this one a shot.
Yep.
I think you'll be pleased.
All right. So that's Alien Frontiers. Thank you very much for joining us. Thanks for joining us in conversation. We look forward to hearing from you very soon.
John and I thank you for joining us in conversation about Alien Frontiers. You can join us in conversation by visiting our website, cellargames.com, where you can find links to our social media and Discord server. We also have a blog and a guild on Board Game Geek. We look forward to hearing from you.